Yo, what's up? I'm back. The last video cut out when I was talking about Warren's healthcare plan, and it cut out because I'm recording with my iPhone rather than my laptop, which I normally record with. I'm actually looking at my laptop because I created notes for these videos, but I did want to continue today and continue where we left off from last time and talking about, I'll go a little bit into healthcare, and then I want to go into the two candidates' foreign policy so that we understand what the differences are between them. But I think I got through most of my points regarding healthcare. I was going over how Warren said she would fund her Medicare for All plan. And I think I just want to talk a little big picture. And the big picture is that we have a healthcare industry that is driven by the insurance companies. Insurance companies are dictating what the prices of procedures are. Pharmaceutical companies are driving what the prices of drugs are. And for that to take place in these entities, which are capitalist entities, capitalist meaning they are primarily concerned with capital, with dollars. They're 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 driven by higher profits, and the way that you get higher profits are to charge the customer more, to pay your employees less, to take jobs overseas so that you could pay employees less. So these entities at their core are not there to serve the American people. And full disclosure, I have a lot of family members who are in the health field. I've worked in that field myself, more on the administration side. I've worked on the insurance, the financial industry as well. So I'm talking a little bit from experience. But in terms of health professionals, healthcare professionals, it's ridiculous that doctors are asked to take an oath to, I forget what the Hippocratic Oath says exactly, but to basically care for the patient, do no harm to the patient, give the patient the best treatment as possible. Yet we are giving faith to these corporations to take care of people because they're paying for everything that the doctor is doing. And these corporations have no oath but to the almighty dollar. This is ridiculous. This is corruption at its core. And we shouldn't stand for it. And the fact that Elizabeth Warren, look, I don't want to come down too hard on her because she does support, in theory, Medicare for all. She hasn't bashed Medicare for all. In theory, she hasn't gone against or gone after Bernie Sanders for his Medicare for all plan. But what she's offering in terms of, okay, what we will do is open a public option, which is still going to have people uninsured. You're still going to have like a window of time when people, if they become unemployed, they might not be able to get the public option until the next fiscal year. It's messy. And the fact that she's not willing to go full throttle and say we are going to get rid of for-profit insurance and have a single payer system where institutions are not vying are not trying to create ploys to create more profit for themselves. The fact that she's not going full throttle with that just makes me think that she's signaling to these companies that she's willing to play nice with them, that she's not willing to overthrow them and benefit us, the ones that need the benefit from all of this the most, the citizens, people who are suffering from health conditions. So that's my take on their philosophy with healthcare. I do want to switch now into foreign policy. And there are pretty stark differences between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders on foreign policy. Both of them are not without fault on foreign policy. I could say pretty much that Bernie Sanders, in terms of healthcare, I don't see much at fault with his plan. Um, you know, I I don't know what could be said exactly, but I think that his plan really does try to serve American citizens. But in terms of foreign policy, he has had some. He wasn't a perfect person always on foreign policy, and he's still not. I don't want to give that impression, but in general, Bernie Sanders has aggressively criticized the wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan. He has voted against defense spending in those wars. He has uh, he has brought forth legislation to help our veterans in those wars, which is fantastic. That's more domestic stuff, not so much foreign policy, but we are asking servicemen and women to go out into the rest of the world to fight on the United States' behalf. So I guess it is some foreign policy. He has aggressively criticized the Israeli government. He has called Benjamin Netanyahu a racist. He has criticized the right-wing Likud government that Benjamin Netanyahu represents. He has criticized the Saudi Arabian government and how corrupt they are and how they sponsor extreme forms of Islam across the world and how they sponsor terrorist activity across the world. And he has also criticized the military coup that occurred in Bolivia as well. And he has also criticized foreign interference in Venezuela. And I'm not sure, but oh yeah, there was also a kind of Twitter exchange between Bernie Sanders and Lula da Silva in Brazil. Lula da Silva being the progressive leader in Brazil who was in jail. And I guess all of this to say, all the support for I don't want to say it's support for Maduro, but it's support against the coup or the foreign interference in Venezuela and against the coup in Bolivia. All this to say that Bernie Sanders is creating a sort of alignment with the workers' movement, the labor movement across the globe. It's not just a workers' movement within the United States that he's thinking about this election, this go around, and he really is keeping in mind everyone across the world. What this signals to me is that he is totally willing to dismantle the current military-industrial complex and the current foreign policy establishment that is constantly telling us that we need to be at war, we need to have our finger in every single pie across the world. But yeah, like I said, Bernie wasn't completely without fault. And I do want to tell a little story about Bernie in 2016. And this was during the primary process. I remember being attracted to Bernie Sanders' campaign pretty early on. He came out with his message for Medicare for all, and you know, in comparison to the mainstream media, they were all in on Hillary Clinton, trying to paint her to be, I guess, the heir apparent to the presidency. And I kind of was like, no, Bernie's got a good message. But one thing that I always look at when candidates are running for something is, where do these candidates stand on Palestine? I'm Arab American, I'm Jordanian, Lebanese American, and I have Palestinian friends, family members, and I've always grown up to understand the struggle that Palestinians have in trying to establish a homeland, a place to call Palestine, based on historic Palestine, based on the stories that my grandmother would tell me about going to visit Palestine. She would take church trips to Jerusalem, to the churches, to the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So I grew up with this kind of knowledge of Palestine, and I understand the struggle. And I also have to say I understand the international fight for Palestine, and that it's more, it's not just representative of the Palestinian struggle, it's also representative of a struggle across the world where people see just a total, like, blatant injustice being committed against one group of people in favor for another, and it just looks ridiculous. So anyways, I looked up Bernie Sanders and where he stood on Israel and Palestine, and in 2015 when he started running, I was really upset by some of the rhetoric that he had regarding Israel and Palestine. There was one town hall I saw on YouTube, which I laugh about now, because he had some people in the audience, definite progressives, like people who were very much for the like pro-Palestinian movement and stuff, and they were criticizing Bernie on his stance. And Bernie was giving, you know, the whole rhetoric with like, Israel is our ally, we have to support Israel no matter what, and he wasn't giving any pro-Palestinian talking points at all. And I laugh because I remember in that town hall, he actually told someone to shut up in the audience. Now, I know I'm saying this, and I know that, like, it sounds really bad for Bernie Sanders. I love Bernie Sanders now, and here's why. Because he had this stance on Israel-Palestine, and I think when he realized that he really created this movement of working class people, and he went to Michigan in the primary in 2016, and there's a large Arab American population in Michigan, and they're overwhelmingly working class. They came out for Bernie. They thought his working class message really resonated with him, and so the Bernie Sanders campaign started running ads in Arabic on Michigan radios. Now, everyone thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win in Michigan in 2016, both the general and the primary. But with the primary specifically, they thought that she would cream Bernie Sanders. I think they thought she would win by 21 points or something. It turns out that Bernie Sanders had won Michigan, I think, by 2 points instead. And, or some, I don't know the exact margin of how much he won, but that's not the point. He had won, and then I remember specifically the very next debate after that Michigan primary where they were asking Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders about Israel and Palestine. Bernie Sanders' tone changed. Look, this is a guy who is beholden to people, and like every politician, they are beholden to the people who donate to them. If Bernie Sanders is getting donations from a coalition of working class people, and that coalition of working class people includes Arab Americans like myself, Muslim Americans, peace-loving, justice-loving Americans who support an end to the devastation against the Palestinian people, Bernie Sanders came out as a result of that and said, no, I have to listen to my constituents, the working class, not constituents, my donors, the working class people of America. I have to listen to what they're saying, and I'm listening, and they're saying they want justice in Palestine. His whole platform is justice in Palestine now. So that is Bernie Sanders. He's done some fantastic things recently. He brought forth a bill in the Senate to end the Saudi, I guess it was to end arming Saudi Arabia against the war in Yemen as well. So there are so many things now that we're seeing. I think Bernie Sanders is probably the best on stage, way better than Joe Biden when talking about foreign policy. I say better than Tulsi Gabbard as well. He's not as contradictory as Tulsi Gabbard is on foreign policy. So that's what we have in Bernie Sanders. Like I said, not without fault. He called the coup, and he called what happened in Bolivia where they ousted Evo Morales, he called that a coup. But he has been hesitant to talk super critically of that, and to talk super critically of the implementation, or they're trying to implement Juan Guaido in Venezuela as the president. But look, he's saying the right things. I also just don't think his style is super adversarial. That's Bernie Sanders on foreign policy. Elizabeth Warren on foreign policy, she is definitely not where Bernie's at in 2020. Definitely not where Bernie was at in 2016 either. So much of her anti-war rhetoric is steeped in language that reaffirms the military-industrial complex. When you hear her talking about getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan, which are good things. Look, if by whatever means we do it, it's fine to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan. I always notice that she talks about it in terms of, we're spending too much money out there, our men and women are making the ultimate sacrifice, and we need to bring them home, keep them safe. And that's fine. Those are all good reasons. But one thing that I never hear from her, and I could be wrong, but I always listen for it, is she never talks about the millions who have died, the millions of brown people, the Afghanis, the Iraqis who have died as a result, the Yemenis who have died as a result of our drone strikes, and Pakistanis as well, and Obama's whole drone strike campaign during his presidency. So the fact that she's not bringing that up and talking about the death that's occurring across the world because of what the United States military is doing, it shows that she doesn't want to shake the pot too much. So it signals to me that she's going to stay the course of the foreign policy establishment. Like I said, she talks about the cost of war is too high. She talks about bad actors. When Soleimani was assassinated by the United States government, I remember a clip on The View where Meghan McCain, who is just like the darling of American media, I'm being sarcastic, she was saying, do you think that Soleimani was a terrorist? Do you think he was a terrorist? Was he a terrorist? And Elizabeth Warren gave in and said, yeah, he was a terrorist. Okay, this is ridiculous to me. I'm going to ask you the question, the viewer. Define the word terrorist. Define it to yourself. And I want you to think about it. What does terrorist actually mean? This is an empty word, a very empty word, and I'm going to argue that it is a racist word. It is a word that is thrown around by Republicans and Democrats in order to signal there are people in this world that it is okay to kill. And these people are overwhelmingly Arab or Muslim, and that's it. That's all that it means, is that the United States can engage in a destructive, belligerent foreign policy and use the U.S. military, the best men and women in the world who fight combat. We can use them to just destroy people that we could sacrifice as collateral. Now, Soleimani was a world leader. I mean, he wasn't the leader of Iran, but he was high in the government in Iran. And like many governments across the world that are corrupt, they end up committing horrible acts against their own people, against other people in other governments, other countries. just like the United States does. And so for Warren to succumb to this notion that he was a terrorist and it's okay that he's dead, but we just needed to go about the round, we had to go directly to Congress in order to justify the killing of Soleimani. That anytime we want to take out the head of state of a country, or the second in command in a country, or the head of anyone's military, we have to ask Congress first. That's an act of war, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit, and it's racist. All right. So yeah, when she talks about foreign policy, she talks about the cost of war is too high. She talks about bad actors like Soleimani, that it's okay that he's dead. That Syrian president Bashar al-Assad is they say the same thing about him, that he's a terrorist or that he's an enemy of the United States. Elizabeth Warren has had a big hesitation to criticize Israel, to criticize the Likud government of Israel, the Likud party. The Likud government is a right-wing government. Why is it not okay to criticize a right-wing? It's like, it's more extreme than Trump Republicans. These are more right-wing than the Republican Party in the U.S. right now. And yet we don't criticize that. So again, this is not to say that she agrees with the current foreign policy establishment, but it's to say that she believes in working within that framework to make any change. And I just don't think that's enough. I don't think it's enough. I think that if you're willing to make that compromise, I think that Barack Obama was exactly in that category. I think that he didn't agree with the foreign policy establishment when we were in the war in Iraq in the 2000s, but he never signaled that he was ready to take on the foreign policy establishment. He talked about bad actors like Saddam Hussein, saying, "Oh, it's good that he's not here anymore." And eventually, what we got with Barack Obama was, all right, maybe we didn't engage our combat troops too much in overt action in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, but we did engage a lot in covert action. You're talking about CIA operations. You're talking about drone strikes that kill weddings, that kill people at weddings, people at birthday parties, whatever it might be. A lot of that went on under the Obama administration, and I feel like a lot of the same would go on under a Warren administration, because she's not willing right now to call out the foreign policy establishment in the military-industrial complex like Bernie Sanders is. And that is a big issue for me. Look, when we talk about security in the United States, we are not safer than we were on September 11th, 2001. And a lot of politicians ever since that time have wanted to talk about how are we going to stay safe as a country. And we stay safe by, I don't want to say by playing nice in the world, but we are not playing nice in the world. So we are sowing the seeds of hatred in other countries by the actions that we're committing. Obama's drone strikes sowed the seeds of hatred around the world. So with Warren, if she were to implement her own foreign policy, I just don't see us being any safer with that. I do see us being safer if we are to take a Bernie Sanders approach, where we align ourselves with the working class of the world, where we completely take out combat veterans. We completely end all military operations around the world, CIA operations. Let people live. If we take that approach, I think we'll be much safer in this country, for sure, in the long run. Um, that's about it. I think I'm running out of time before my my phone will just turn off. Um, but yeah, I guess the other thing too is that, and I didn't want to talk about the whole bullshit scandal of like, oh, did Bernie Sanders really say that he doesn't think a woman could become president? Like, first of all, you all know that's fake. That's fake news. But I think what it does is it signals that Elizabeth Warren is so willing to cozy up to like this faction of the Democratic Party that thinks of themselves as progressive or liberal, the woke performance art types, the ones that are like, oh, look at her, slay queen, and she went up to him and rejected that handshake like a girl would to an ex-boyfriend that's saying like, come on baby, we're still good. All that performance art wokeness that's not really woke. It's really a conservative class within the progressive movement that I'll argue about that later, why I think it's actually conservative. But it's the fact that she's willing to cozy up to that, all of that just shows like her priorities are so off. None of that has anything to do with anything. And we have the actual danger right now that Joe Biden might be the nominee. And rather than taking on Joe Biden in that debate and pushing for your ideals, your values, saying that Medicare for all is what we need to have on a Democratic platform in 2020, that you're willing instead to take out someone just because you want the position more. It shows a selfishness that we don't need in a leader. And I mean, that's my take on it. I don't know. So anyways, that's it. I'm going to cut it right now before it cuts off on me. Hope this helped out. And I'll come back to you guys with more content. Hope this was helpful. Peace. Oh yeah, follow me. Twitter, Instagram, at Johnny Jabbour, JOHNNY JABBOUR. And yeah, I'll see you on another episode of Johnny's Jabs.